Get your affairs in order. What's up, folks? This is Justin Garcia, a.k.a. Master Chim, and I'm here with the White Affair of Order. Patrick Kelly, White Boy Pat.
What's up?
And welcome to another episode of The Pressure Project. ThePressureProject.com is our website. Info@ThePressureProject.com is our contact email. You can go to MasterChim.com and get on the email list. And what other?
The Warrior Project.
The Warrior Project is our membership site. If you want to go and become a member, I don't know if you are worthy of such membership. But if you feel you are, go to thewarriorproject.com, give me some money, and open the gates of power.
100%.
But absolutely, I have a lot of solid people as members of the Warrior Project. People I'm grateful to know. People I've met on many occasions, have interacted with on a fairly regularly basis for, it's got to be 2 years now we've had the Warrior Project.
Yeah.
And it's good to go. So anyway, all that being said, today's episode is about preparation for the inevitable. Preparation for the inevitable. So we recently had, and this is a big official rest in power to Warrior Project member Sean, who passed recently. And this topic came up as, as these events tend to come up. Sean, who's been a member of the Warrior Project since the beginning, wound up passing away abruptly. It was a surprise to everybody a few weeks ago. And he's survived by his wife, Summer, and his beautiful daughters, Fiona and Anya. And it was tragic. It was unfortunate. But, as we're going to discuss today, things like this, such negative, events like this are not impossible. And being that they're not impossible, it is my advice to, and even, to somewhat pressure and lean on the men of tribes and the men of families, to get their stuff squared away. We never know when we get to go. I remember having a talk during a friend's passing with a family member, and one of the things that they had expressed was, which is a very common sentiment, why now?
Yeah.
Why now? This is the wrong time. And my response during the conversation was, well, if you think about it, like, when would we choose for them to die? If you were given, and I didn't bring this up to the
of
morning,
course,
but for discussion's sake, if you were to say, I don't want my loved one to die today, you would have to pick. When you'd want them to die then. Like, well, when's the good day?
Yeah.
When's the
Thursday?
Right. Thursday. Right. And this is the dilemma. And my position is, this is why it's not up to us.
Yeah.
This is why we need to respect the way that, the universe, sort of lays out our fate in front of us. And sometimes it feels like it's the most unfair thing to happen. But I never feel like looking at it that way is ever going to improve a situation.
It doesn't.
No matter how traumatic an event may be, I think a general rule, it's one that I hold personally and have for some time, a general rule is to always look for the power.
Yeah.
Where is
100%.
the power in this? Where's the opportunity to become a better person, a better father, husband, brother, etc.? And I think it's a great, first step to dealing with otherwise traumatic events. So, talking about getting your affairs in order, I have a couple of topics here to discuss, the goal of which is to allow your loss to those around you be no more than it should be in terms of adversity and trauma, etc. If you are a man who is, or a woman, I mean, this applies to both certainly. But if you're a person of value, that means your removal is removing value. So there is a loss just in you not being there. But when one's affairs aren't in order, it compounds that loss. It compounds the issues, and you wind up, creating a synergy in the wrong direction. You don't want to make any loss greater than it already is.
100%.
So we're going to start off with number one here on the topics I want to discuss, and it's something that I believe in wholeheartedly. It's something we've discussed on many occasions.
Yeah.
It's old wisdom. It's certainly not, a creation of mine. But death should not be a stranger. Death should not be a stranger. So one of the things that I've done from the beginning of my children's lives is discuss what death is, discuss and add the context of what death is to us in our lives. There is nobody that is going to not die. So I've always looked at the rejection or the avoidance of the inevitable to be weakness.
100%. Yeah.
If everybody we know is going to die, how is it that we should ever have a culture that does not embrace that sort of cycle of life?
Yeah.
I recall seeing, and you may have seen this a few months back, a guy who was talking about an Irish funeral. Did you ever see that video?
I don't think so.
So in Ireland, the guy was saying that when somebody passes, they lay the person out, in a wake in their home, and everybody comes.
Oh, yeah. Everyone shows up. Yep.
Everybody shows up, and he described the cathartic nature of the ritual in that everybody pretty much makes you accept that this person's no longer here.
Yeah.
And it's not something that's avoided. It's not something that's, rejected. It's owned from the beginning.
Yep.
And it allows people to move on. And he said, the waves of emotion, crying, laughing, up and down is inherent in that ritual. But at the tail end of it, we've allowed this, this new chapter to begin, the former chapter to end. And I think that's important. So from the beginning of my children's lives, I've spoken about death. I've often started talks with, Daddy isn't going to be here forever. One day when Daddy's gone, these are the things that, we should be focusing on you doing. These are the things that, you're going to be expected to do. These are the things I'm preparing you for.
This is what's going to happen, and this is what you're responsible for.
Right.
When I'm not responsible for it anymore.
Right, and it's and
there's power in that.
Yeah, and if your mother passes before I do, these are the things that are going to honor her, and she's there to have the conversation with them.
100%.
And
not something you run away from or shy away from, something that you have and face head on.
Right, and it's curious. It was interesting, and it was actually a positive thing for me looking at my children, namely my sons. My daughter's still pretty young. But my sons go through my father's passing a few months back.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, here's the time to show and prove. Is this all is this all bullshit or
pretty sure they stepped up to the plate 100%.
It's it was amazing to me. It was amazing to me, and it was such a positive, reinforced, feeling of accomplishment in that. All right, we did it. My wife and I, we've prepared these kids for one of the things that, is like the enemies of weaker people, throughout society nowadays, death, the idea of dealing with death. And my sons were, as squared away as I could have asked, each of them processing it, asking good questions and expressing, loss and expressing, sadness to some extent, but having a place to put it, understanding where this is.
Yeah.
Not having it exist, because I think when you do not have death as a component of your understanding of life and the universe in general, when it inevitably happens, the amount of trust you have in your reality is thrown on its head.
Yeah. It's the shock. There shouldn't be a shock like that kind of flips your world upside down.
Right. And it's just think about, there are plenty of points in our life, milestones in our life where we've come to a greater realization.
Yeah.
And that realization representing a closer understanding of reality as it is.
100%. Yeah.
But every single time you think something is the way it is, and then you are reminded by the universe that, such is not as you always think it is, people tend to have, these psychological breaks or traumatic experiences. And it's because something happened that somebody pretty much was treating as being impossible, but it turns out it was probable.
Yeah.
And then when it happens, they feel like they've been betrayed by reality to some extent.
100%. Yeah.
And if you can't trust this, then what can you trust? And it begins this
a whole downward spiral,
right? And of depression and introspection and et cetera. So
that some people don't come back from.
Right, absolutely. And I would say that if you're somebody who has children, death should be part of the the culture in the home. It needn't be morbid. It needn't be this. It's like, did everybody wake up? Oh man, thought one of you'd be dead today. It's like
glad you're not dead, son.
Right?
Maybe tomorrow.
Right. Think you're gonna wake up tomorrow?
Good night. Turns the light
on. Right, but I think you do your children a disservice if you don't. And this is a general thing. Like anything that's inevitable, anything that's probable, like you should be dealing with. That's kind of your fucking job as a parent.
Preparing them to stand on their own 2 feet.
Right, for reality.
Yeah, for reality.
And so I think, that first thing, if you're talking about getting your affairs in order, understanding that these talks need to happen.
Yeah.
For me, like I said, the greatest, most recent example I've had is watching my children navigate, my father's passing and coming out on the opposite end, stronger than ever.
Yeah, and death was not a stranger to them. They definitely,
and they still talk about him all the time. Of course. And it's always a productive thing. It's not the pulling of the scab off of a wound.
Yeah, no.
And it's
honor and legacy.
Right, and it's strong. It's all based in strength, which is great.
That's awesome.
So second thing, and this is a little bit more, nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes.
Yeah,
money matters.
Responsibility.
Money matters. If you are the breadwinner if you go out and win bread.
You go out and win the bread at the bread winning event.
I'm doing keto, so
no, right. What are you
the meat winner?
You're the meat winner.
But
that's
it has
fine.
all the I don't like that phrase either. It's like, but if you're the person who is bringing home the bacon,
there you go.
There you go.
That's a good one.
And you're gone. Who the fuck is going to feed your family?
Yeah, who's gonna bring the bacon?
Who is going to feed your family? Now, I have life insurance. Do you have life insurance?
Yes.
Fucking better have life insurance.
100%.
You'd look like an asshole.
I would. My whole family has life insurance.
Well, that's a little crazy.
My kids, everyone. They all have.
Put a policy out of my neighbor.
Yeah. Well, not them. Family. Yeah. I've had life insurance since I was little. My parents got me life insurance when I was a kid.
That's good. They didn't know if you would make it.
Yeah, they were like, fucking,
this motherfucker's crazy.
He's too white and he's nuts. Crazy white boy. Get him insurance.
Get him insurance, because if you're somebody who brings an income into the home, and your family relies on that income, well, what the fuck do you think's going to happen when you're not there? Do you really give a fuck enough about them to prepare and to sacrifice now so that they're not going to be at a loss later on? More than you not being there is going to provide, already. I remember when I first, my wife was first expecting, I didn't have life insurance. I didn't really give a fuck about anything that we're talking about now, because at the time I was married.
Yeah.
My wife was a 24-year-old hot Brazilian chick. I was a budding MMA fighter, like best shape of my life. Like, I didn't give a fuck. She's healthy. I'm healthy. Life's an adventure.
You didn't even open doors. You would just fucking run through the door.
Just
like I don't fucking use door handles.
I didn't have a care in the world.
Yeah.
And I thought it was like UFC or bust. That was my philosophy. Yeah. And I remember when my wife first got pregnant and we were expecting my first son, you know, everything changed.
As it should.
And it was like, holy shit, there's this kid. Because before then, something happens to me. Like, my wife's good. Like, she's independent. She's strong. Like, she'll be fine.
Sure, 100%.
But my child now, I'm on the hook for this.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't want to fight anymore. I wanted to invest in my business. I needed more of an income. Like, I didn't want my kid to not have the things that he needed. Like, I went into paranoid parent mode, which is normal, you know, for most men in the Western world, right? So when you look at, you know, when you allow yourself through your deeds, through your promises, your obligations, your oaths, when you put yourself in a position where people are financially relying on you, what makes you think that your death absolves you of those responsibilities? You know, so especially if you're talking about a child. The child didn't ask to be brought into this fucking world.
No.
Right? And I'm certainly not saying, you know, we should be keeping our children on the teat for as long as we possibly can. But there is a point where we need to look out for them, you know, before we send them off on their own adventures. And, you know, do you have life insurance? Do you have you thought about any sort of residual income? You know, whether it's a rental property you're buying or some sort of, you know, financial product.
Some equity that could last beyond your death.
Right. Something that's going to allow them to live. My grandparents, my grandfather specifically on my mother's side, was a truck driver for a long time. And when he retired, one of the things that was standard in his generation is you were given stock options.
Yeah.
You know, and that became my grandparents' income once he retired, you know, along with other things that he had. But it became a significant source of income for them, you know, and it's because he allowed the design of what his retirement was going to look like. He allowed that to factor in that he had an obligation to support the people he was supporting.
100%.
You know? Yeah. Now, in his situation, it was just my grandmother for the most part, but he was responsible enough to do the thinking involved, right?
Yeah.
So when looking at, you know, if you're a father, a husband, or just somebody where people rely on your productivity financially, you know, and you've obligated yourself to these things, you know, I would question anybody that thinks their death, you know, resolves them of those obligations.
100%. Yeah.
So
someone else's problem now. I'm out. Yeah. See ya.
You know, so something to think about.
It is.
You know, if your wife and children are going to be struggling after you pass because you just didn't think about or didn't care to plan for something that was very possible, you're passing, you know, how does that reflect on you? Because it does reflect on you. Yeah. You know, don't think that your legacy isn't tarnished by a family that, for all intents and purposes, was abandoned by your death, you know?
And that's true. It becomes the same thing as if you move to Belize and never talk to your people again.
Right.
It's the same, like that guy, what would you call him?
Yeah, well, think about all the people that we chastise for just bailing in general on their families. Yeah. You know, like, and think about the similarities and and why is it that we treat one, oh, well, you know, if you die, you know, it's not up to you, you know, it's not your choice. Yeah, but it was possible.
Yeah, and you control.
It was always possible.
And you always need to control all the things you can control. And one of the things is setting up a plan.
Right. Right, because one of the things you can't control is when you're dead.
Yeah. Well, you can, but that's different. Those are different. Those guys are crazy.
You could invite death early, but you can never send him away.
Correct.
You know, so
100%. Yeah.
It's something that, you know, any man should be factoring in.
Yep.
All right. So next thing.
Yeah.
Legal loose ends.
Yeah.
So part of the I guess trauma and obstacles of somebody passing is, where are their papers? Where are their documents? Where is, what do you own? What do you have an interest in? What, do you have a piece of a business that nobody knows about? Do you have
a bank account in the Cayman Islands?
Right. Like, do you, do you have, or just maybe documents concerning your family history?
Sure.
That you're going to want to pass on for information's sake,
Yeah.
all of these things, if you drop today, does your wife know where to get everything? Does she have access to everything?
Yeah.
Do you have something in place to make sure that she knows what's going on? Like that little secret stash you have of $5,000 that your wife doesn't know about. Well, is that $5,000 lost if you fucking drop dead today?
Yeah.
Like just things to question and prepare for. If I've lost my birth certificate, I've lost this, I've lost that. Like part of being a responsible participant in a society, and all the anarchists can go fuck themselves because all of them have a fucking driver's license like everybody else.
And they all use money.
Right. And the thing is, remember, and the mission of this, the reason we're bringing it up is to not add a burden on your family once you're gone.
100%.
You don't want to have your wife struggling to find your ID or your, one of the things my mother had to do when my father passed was show his DD 214 maybe is basically the paper that where he was discharged from the military.
Okay, yeah.
In order to get him buried in in a national cemetery.
Yep.
So, but they had it. He had, like, my father had this stuff organized, and my father died suddenly. It wasn't a long illness or anything, but his affairs were in order.
You can go as far as to prepay and arrange your funeral, headstone.
I used to work in a funeral home.
You can have shit fucking taken care of way in advance.
You can get a life insurance policy to just cover the cost of a funeral. When you're talking about your will, like when's the last time you wrote a will? Do you have a will? Something happens to you where you get into some bad accident and you're maimed and you're half fucking retarded.
Yeah, who gets power of attorney? What's your living will? Like, that's a whole thing.
All of these things need to be thought about if you're somebody of value and responsibility.
Yeah.
If you're a bum on the fucking street, if you're a guy who, you work at the GameStop and you watch porn and play video games all day, like nobody gives a fuck if you die,
Yeah, pretty much. They won't find you for months.
If you're living one of those good riddance type lifestyles, it's like none of this applies to you. But if you're somebody who is of worth, somebody who has accumulated some value to the point where people actually rely on you, this goes along with it. This is par for the course. This is part of the plan, right? Yeah. So
your living will should not say, "So long, thanks for the fishes." That's not a good will. That's not a good plan.
So legal loose ends.
Yeah.
The last one. Legacy design. So this is an important one, I think, because it's something that I've brought up before on occasion.
Yeah.
It's something that people have given me feedback on, of not only them doing it, but I've had a family member come and tell me that, the person that passed in their family started doing this and they were grateful for it. But what is the connection of you to the next generation beyond your passing? So I had always brought up this podcast.
Yeah.
Like, if something happens to me, and like my children are now of the age where I'm interacting with them a lot more effectively and productively. But had I passed when all my children were young and they never really knew me, like my daughter doesn't really know me yet. She's only 3. They have hundreds of podcast episodes.
Yeah.
Watching their dad talk about everything.
Anything and everything you can think of.
They have, they could watch me compete in MMA and jiu-jitsu and in football and in powerlifting. And, I've done a lot of writing. I've done a lot of interviews on other people's shows and stuff. Like there is a collection, a body of work that they'll have access to that'll allow them, placed or overlaid on the backdrop of what family members or their mothers has told them about me. They'll be able to understand me to the point where it allows me the legacy that I see as being so important, so integral in my very purpose. A strong legacy and a good death. Like to me, those are the two things. So
all the things that you talk about and espouse, like if you had, let's say, a 6-month-old infant right now,
right,
10 years from now, they could follow the formulas and know them just like if you taught them directly.
Right.
I
like that. They could follow the formulas. Because that's what you're leaving. You're leaving the formulas of not only how you dealt with your life, but what you see as being valuable.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about like what's the role of a parent, amongst the many roles and responsibilities is showing them the formulas, showing them what works, what we do to be us, right? The ritual and the RPS formula.
Yeah.
What are we doing that allows us to extend our tribal, existence? And if you're somebody who has never done that, now this could be simple videos of you talking to your children. Listen to this when you're 18 years old. And it could be something you play for them when they're 18, even though you're still around. But how do your children know who you are? How do you know, like if you were dying in 24 hours and you wanted to give everybody a message on what's important, what would that video look like? Why not record these things anyway? Why not actually sit down and articulate what everybody means to you, what, your guidance or advice to them is? Why wouldn't you do that? There's really not a reason. So it could be heirlooms. It could be things in your family that have been passed down from generation to generation. And you were given these things, 20, 30 years ago, and they might not be of significance to you. But you know what? Your children might honor these things, might enjoy these things. My father had certain keepsakes and things that will turn into heirlooms 100%. Because they were significant and of value. So,
and if you don't have any, let's say, make one.
Absolutely make
let's
one.
Let's say you might be the strongest link of the chain right now, and you maybe the ones before don't. Let's say the chain's broken. You're number one. Let's say you didn't know your father, you didn't know your mother. Who knows? Doesn't mean you can't start now. Like create that legacy and have what's going to be an heirloom. This is something we're going to pass down through the family. You can make it yourself.
Right. There's that saying. What are the two best times to plant a tree? 20 years ago and today.
Yeah.
If living with strength and living with a strong philosophy is the mission, is the goal, and nobody in your family and your line up until you has ever thought of this, that's really not a reason to not put yourself on the hook for being the first one.
Yeah, you do it.
It's if you've been eating unhealthy for 5 years straight, well, reversing that starts with you eating healthy today, and then eating healthy tomorrow. There's a million ways to say this.
Because you can't go back 20 years ago.
Right.
They don't have that yet. Time machines and shit.
Right.
Not yet.
So, not yet. So, legacy design is important. Now, I know that, different cultures deal with these things in different ways. There are some cultures which I would say are, I don't want to call them low quality, but certainly when you look at some cultures, there is the collection of wealth through generations. And these cultures tend to understand getting their affairs in order as a component of being them.
Yes.
But there are other cultures who it's like every generation is like a shaken Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah, pretty much.
You do whatever you're going to do. You enjoy the ride.
Figure it out.
And then you're done. Yeah. And then the next generation does the same thing. And wealth is accumulated one generation deep and nothing ever comes of it. Well, not the way to be.
No.
Not the way to be.
If you want success.
Right,
Not
if
the
you
way
want
to
to be
be.
successful.
Yeah, not a
you
very
know?
good formula.
I remember when the whole white privilege, thing started becoming popular, popular excuse amongst the weak. I remember Tom writing on social media somewhere. He said, yeah, there's white privilege. We worked hard for that privilege. And you should work hard for your
privilege.
Children to have privilege too.
It's like we fought for it.
It's like, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? What privileges can you give the next generation? Well, all of that is in the preparation of how the fruits of your labors is, transferred to them, and the process by which that transference occurs is on you.
Yeah.
So it's something that's noble, it's responsible, and in line with anybody that's saying, they should be, men of their word and, their oaths or their bond and, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Like this goes hand in hand with all of that. And to avoid this is certainly incongruent to all of that, So
100%.
So power player.
Okay.
A power player for this episode is the samurai.
The samurai.
Samurai.
Yes.
In the samurai culture, they never knew when they were going to die.
Nope.
They never knew, are they going to die in a fight they were going to have in a street? Are they going to die in a war? Are they going to die, or were they going to die because their master ordered them to kill themselves?
Yeah. Which happened.
Which happens. So when you look at a culture that is so intimately related to death, it is embedded in who they are to always have their affairs in order, because they never know when they're going to die. And, the probability of it, I'd imagine, if you're a samurai, is much higher than the average, mid-management schmuck in middle America somewhere.
100%.
And because of that, it was embedded right into how they lived their lives.
Yeah. They were already dead.
Right? And, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of stoic philosophers, and certainly when you look at, in the martial arts line, the samurai culture specifically, a lot of people who have written, many comments and commentaries and philosophies concerning forging a relationship with death, the idea of death. But how we actually manifest that relationship is through understanding that we may not be here tomorrow, and making sure that everything in our life is congruent with that fact. So if you say, the whole idea of, waiting to the last second.
Yeah.
Waiting to the last second. Oh, I'm going to do my report. It's due tomorrow. How come you didn't do it? You've known about it a month. Oh, it's not due till tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then they start, 2 hours before it's done. It doesn't get finished in time. And the first thing they want to say is, I ran out of time.
Yeah.
Well, no. And how you handle things of that nature is very much, there's something, I remember it was in the Mind Killers Power Program, hyperbolic discounting. What do we value? How do we value something when the timeline is extended?
Yeah.
Does it lose value to us? Well, it does for everybody. It's like, would you rather $1,000 now or $1,100 a year from now? Give me the 1,000.
Yeah.
And then just as a simple example, $1,100 is $100 more than 1,000. You're saying no to $100 because you just want this now.
Yep.
Because $1,100 a year from now is less than 1,000 now, the way that you value it. And that discounting is something that, you'll see some cultures do very well with, some cultures do very poorly with. But aside from what the cultures are, you as the individual, you get to make decisions, as to what type of man you are, what type of father, husband, etc. you are. And when you look at the samurai culture, everything about them was organization, was keeping things in order, having a respect for death, knowing that it can come at any moment, and that they were always prepared for it.
Not afraid of it, not running from it.
Right, not afraid, not at all, which leads us to our unicorn. So when you look at
the exact opposite.
The exact opposite.
Yeah.
You have the modern man.
The modern man.
So it's a much broader concept that leads us to, and the many applications of why modern man is fucking up, or the many examples. One is a complete rejection of building the relationship with death.
Yeah.
When you have a society that's based on the removal of discomfort, well, what better example of that will you find than the trauma and pain of dealing with the loss of a loved one? Well, it's inevitable, and people, by and large, do not deal with it until it happens.
Yeah.
I remember dealing with a family member during the passing of one of their parents, and she wasn't having a good time at all, and she wasn't being productive, and she was really going through it, and she still had one parent alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, well, what happens when your other parent passes? Is that it? The nail in the coffin?
Yeah.
Is that why they had you?
Yeah.
So that you could die when they do? And it's just a opening of the eyes to what this is all about.
100%.
Like, you could look at everybody in your family and you go, you know what? That person could be dead tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now what does that do? It allows us to be grateful. So one of the things that I was so fortunate to sort of think of a few years back was I had this epiphany concerning my father. Now, my father and I had a very tumultuous relationship throughout my life. I was a nut job. I was super stubborn, hard-headed, and my father was old school, like, this is what's right. This is the world as I know it. And it's not up for negotiation.
Yeah.
And just as stubborn as I was, or him. So a few years back, I made the decision. I said, you know what? My father's not going to be here forever.
Yeah.
And I made the conscious decision to allow any of the things we'd argue about, like, none of that mattered.
Trivial.
Like, none of that shit matters.
Yeah.
I want to get to know him. And it allowed me, and it was, what I put, the reason I allowed myself to think of this, or how I came to this conclusion was, I told myself, he's going to die eventually. Same thing with my mother.
Yeah.
They're not going to be here eventually. So when we're dealing with these people, are we still trying to navigate where we are on the hierarchy compared to them? Are we still trying to win? Are we still trying to get over or defend our identity, or is all of that trivial? Because I would argue that there's a certain point, especially with elder members of your family, where that's no longer an issue, if it ever was.
Yeah, 100%.
And with my father, it allowed me to not get hung up on the things we disagreed with. When he'd get beat, when he'd be grumpy, and his grumpiness, and how I dealt, like, none of that mattered.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed his company every time I had it during the last couple of years. And he and I, probably in the last 2-3 years of his life, had better conversations than we had.
That's awesome.
My previous 40 years.
Yeah.
Why? Because I wasn't vying for a place on the totem pole.
Yeah.
And
we weren't competing.
Right. And as soon as I let go of that, I was able to be me. He was able to be him.
It's good.
You know. And when you look at modern man, they see the embracing of death as some sort of morbid, depressive stressor. Like, why would you want to fill your head with that?
Yeah.
But what it does a lot of things. And I think at the heart of it, it's a gratitude for the people who are here. Scarcity, right? It's how we create value, by how scarce something is, put up against how in demand it is, how much people want it. Well, we want our loved one's company very much. But if we see their days as being endless, then the value we put upon them is lessened.
100%.
When we see it as being finite, we add scarcity to our perception of their days, of their times.
And it becomes infinitely more valuable.
Right. It becomes, this is like if people who haven't spoken to their father in 6 months or their mother in 6 months. Your father's going to die in 48 hours.
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you let him die without calling him, without visiting him, without appreciating him, without expressing to him how you feel about him? But if you have people who walk around as if
take it for granted.
This is never going to end. Yeah, taking it for granted is your MO. Now, it's not to say we should sit there and just dwell on and fester on the whole idea of everybody we love is going to leave us.
Yeah.
Again, like we still have to be functional, but we understand that is a piece of the pie. That topic gets a seat at the table. We don't reject that. We don't ignore it. And we also understand that the more we deal with these things, the less traumatic they are. I remember, when I was a kid, snow. I loved snow.
Snow, yeah. Snow's great.
As I started getting older and driving, it's like, fuck, it's snowing out.
Owning a business when it snows is always like, okay.
Yeah, it's like, I got to deal with this shit. But then you'll see people come here who I remember my wife's parents, right, from Brazil. They came here, this was before her father passed, and they came here and it was wintertime. They wanted to play in the snow like children.
Because they're not used to that shit.
And you lose sight of that.
Yeah.
You lose sight of that.
Scarcity.
Because you take it for granted.
Yeah, 100%.
I remember when I moved up to into the mountains in Pennsylvania, I would talk about walking outside. And to this day, like whenever I get home, and you've been to my house, I park my car, I go outside, like I'm in the middle of nature. I'm in the middle of and you just smell the air, the trees, the breeze. And you could stand outside my house at night during nighttime, and it sounds like there are cars coming, but it's just the wind going through I love these things. I remember I used to always talk about it, and one of our buddies was like, you know what? You really made me reappreciate all these stuff because, and he grew up
there.
Take
it for granted, yeah.
He was like, I lose track of how beautiful this stuff is, and and absolutely, and again, it's the scarcity, and it's understanding that these things are never gonna, that none of these things are always, and it allows you to add some gratitude.
100%.
So, get your affairs in order. White Boy Pat, break it down.
So get your affairs in order. Get your fucking shit together. You need to have everything squared away way in advance of anything that could happen. You could walk outside and an air conditioner fucking lands on your head and you're dead. What's going to happen to your family? That should all be squared away. You disappear. I snap my fingers. Bang, you're gone. Your family's good. Everything is good. So start planning for that now. If you haven't already, you need to get on it. If you have, great. Good for you. But if you haven't, fucking make it happen.
Agreed. To add, how we live our lives is very much connected to and a reflection of who we are going to, or what we are going to represent once our life is over. If you are somebody who's never looked to provide to the best of your ability for your family, then how would you ever plan on creating a legacy? What is the worth of your name? What is the worth of your presence? In your family's line. What's the value? I think about the fact that I'm not going to be here on a daily basis, and it not only inspires me, motivates me, demands that I get my affairs in order, but it also drives me in my professional life, in the maintenance of my relationships. When we understand that our life is finite, it is very hard for us to build the arrogance of the ignorant. Act like you're going to live forever. You walk through life not worrying about a lot of stuff. You might even escape life without ever having worried about it. But understand, the person who does that is somebody who doesn't give a damn about the value of his name. If you're the guy who was going on vacations, partying, doing all these different things, even with your family, and then you die and they're in the poorhouse, just exactly how good of a job have you done? It's not about living within your means. It's about doing what's necessary to bring your means to the level of what you feel good living is. And it comes from not only being a man of your word, from pressuring yourself to become the man you were meant to be, to connecting with a tribe that creates that synergy of effort and value. But it's also understanding that your journey is not the end of the line, and respecting that with every day of your life. Thank you, folks, for listening. I appreciate you guys. Appreciate you hanging out with Pat and I during this talk. Hope you enjoyed it. You guys know thepressureproject.com is the website. If you have any show suggestions, criticisms, not criticisms, I'm not going to give a fuck. I'm just going to delete it. But if you want to say really cool things about us, we always like reading them, But I do appreciate your guys' time. Everybody's busy these days. And for you to sort of carve off a little bit of it to hang out with us does not go unnoticed. To that effect, if you are listening to us on iTunes or even YouTube, we have the ability, or you have the ability, to leave us a rating, a review. Maybe it's just a thumbs up. Maybe it's just spreading the word to somebody about the Pressure Project. We appreciate anything you guys can do to help us grow, because without you guys, we wouldn't have grown from the beginning. All that being said, thank you for listening and or watching. And as always, brothers, pressure to power.